Good morning, friends. Back today with another tutorial. Today we're going to do some birds. These birds have Santa hats. Well, not Santa hats. I was going to do Santa hats. I want these geared more toward winter, something that we can enjoy throughout the winter season up till spring hits. So I've actually just got stocking caps on these. The colors that I'm using today are Winsor Newton's Aqua, black, orange. That's how I make brown if you've watched my videos before. And then we're going to throw in some different colors for the hats. I've got red, I've got purple on here, purple here, hot pink, there's yellow, so whatever color I decide to use in the given time for the hat. So for the first thing that we're going to do is I like to start with the background in these cases. I have my water here and a number 12 brush. This is kind of my go-to for doing backgrounds on smaller paper, and my number 4 brush, Princeton Round, Neptune. So I'm going to start by making a little puddle in my tray. So I've got about 2 brushfuls of water, and I just squeegee it off onto the side, and then I'm going to go in with the orange to tint it, and the black, and this is what makes brown. So you can go either warm or cool, dark or light when you do this. And then if you want to cool it down just a little bit, which I'm going to, I'm just going to brush over just briefly on my dark blue, which is Winsor Newton's Indigo. And now I'm going to rinse my brush, blot it once, and then I'm going to go right up to the branch and around the birds and just lightly wet the paper. And what this does is helps carry the paint throughout the paper instead of just controlling where the color goes. This technique is called wet on wet. Another branch there. You don't want puddles. Like this right here is a puddle. So I'm going to sop that up if it doesn't soak into the paper before I get to it. And this does not have to be a neat process. It does not have to be perfectly even. Watercolor paper is cotton, and like any paper, when you get it wet, it starts to bubble and distort. So that's why I have every single one of my paintings, unless it's just a one that I'm doing on cheap paper just to get the painting set up, I always have taped down to cardboard. The larger ones, if I don't have cardboard very big, I tape right onto the table that I'm working at. This is an art studio, so I don't need to worry about picking it up and putting it away like I did in my earlier years of painting when I'd use the dining room table or the kitchen counter. So if that's where you're at right now, where you don't have a dedicated space to do your art, I forgot to draw that, then keeping them on cardboard is probably going to be your most convenient. I'd also like to add, if you're a beginner, keeping them small is also very helpful, because the larger you get, the harder it is to control the pigment and how much, and it's just easier to get the depth of color on smaller paintings like this one. When you get into the larger ones, or you start off big, then it's not always the easiest to you may not like what it turns out. It might turn you away from painting. Okay, now that I got that wet, I'm going to just drop in some of this color, and I want this to be very light. So I'm going to drop in random spots, and then I'm going to just cover it all up with or spread it with my brush. You can see how much paint is actually on my brush by how far I'm going without re-dipping into my tray. That's because this is a watercolor brush and it's meant to hold that amount of water. Go back in. And the reason I chose brown for this one is because I like to mix my warm colors and my cool colors. And since the birds are going to be very cool, kind of wintry palette, I wanted to offset that with a warmer neutral for the background. And the only reason I'm doing a background on these is because I'm going to splatter white ink at the very end to do the snow. Okay, this is a little bit too dark, so I've rinsed my brush and I've blotted it twice on my towel. So now I'm going to pull some of that up, and I'm going to do that by rinsing, blotting, and using the brush to lighten those areas. I do not like puddles on my paper. Flip the board and work on this side now. See, if we didn't wet the paper first, this would already be dry and it wouldn't be a soft transition. So that's what wetting the paper does for you. It gives you a little bit more time to work with the color that you're putting on. Gives you more beautiful painting. And I'm not sure where my mat board's gonna end up on this. Probably somewhere right in there, so I'm gonna stop right there. And then we're gonna let this dry, because if we go right in and start painting the birds, all the color will bleed together. The little trick I like to do is I keep a blow dryer handy. So I actually blow dry instead of walking away and waiting for it to dry itself, because I like to, when I sit down, I want to get started and I want to get finished. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the birds. And I'm going to use the aqua color for the shadows on the bird instead of a brown or a black, just to bring again another wintry hue. I'm going to leave that brown on my paper because we're going to use that for his head too. We don't need a whole lot of water here because the birds are so small. I'm using my larger brush to put the pigment on the paper. But I'm going to switch to my smaller brush, or put the pigment into the paint, I'm sorry. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush when I start painting. I'm also going to mix just a little bit of the hot pink and a little bit of yellow. And you can see that I don't need very much at all. This is called Amarillo, or cadmium yellow. I believe it's cadmium. And I warm it up. Whoops, that's way too much orange. I'm just going to sop that up and add yellow back to it. Just give a little bit of sunshine. Okay, so now with the small brush, I'm going to start with one bird at a time. I'm going to wet around his belly area. Right down to the branch. We're going to put some snow on this branch so you don't have to get right up to it. But go ahead and wet his body and his tail feathers. Again, not soaked, just a little damp. And then stick your brush into your aqua color. And just kind of go around him. And into his feathers too. Okay, I'm just going to dry my brush on my towel here. And I'm going to pull some of that water up. My paint's just a little bit too wet. And then I'm going to go into the brown. And at the top of the feathers, do a little bit of brown and let that bleed in. And then also on his head. Go right up to the bottom of his hat or her. And let it flow into the blue as well. And now I'm going to, using a clean dry brush, sop just a little bit of the blue up from his belly. And maybe drop just a little bit of pink in. Again, wintry colors. I drop it in and now I'm going to sop it up. And since he is wet, the paper's wet here, it's just all going to bleed and flow very nicely together. So this would be kind of like the epitome of sunshine on him, and that's a little too dark for my liking, or maybe the pink is too light, I'm not sure, but we're going to pull some of it up anyway. You could always go in and add more, but you can't take it away, so don't be scared to start light and dry your paper if you don't like how light it is. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next bird and do the same thing. We're going to avoid his wings this time. These birds represent sparrows. So that's where the brown head and the white body is coming in. And pull some of that paint up. I just realized my brown got up into the belly of this bird, and that's okay because it's watercolor and these are pretty loose paintings, which means we're not getting down to all the details, the fine details of it. So if there's a little bit of paint that bleeds onto something else, then so be it. The sparrow's wings are also brown and black, so we're just going to do brown. And like the top one, we're going to drop just a little bit of pink in. And you saw that I just barely touched my brush onto the paper and it just kind of spread. Okay, and now the last bird. Again, avoid that wing for now. And now we'll go in for the wing. And a little pink. Okay, now back up to this top bird. I'm going to mix a little bit more black in with the brown here. And since this paper is still a little damp, I'm going to drop just a little bit of brown in the top of his tail feathers. And I'm going to go back in and darken a little bit of the brown area around his head. The Bible says that we are worth, that if God cares about the sparrow, how much more does he care about us who's created in his image? And I love that verse because Matthew records the sparrows being 2 for a penny. And then Luke records the sparrows as being 5 for 2 pennies. So you can kind of see a buy 4, get 1 free type of deal. And sparrows in the Old Testament, or in the New Testament, were actually an hors d'oeuvre. So these were very cheap hors d'oeuvres, but God still cares about them. So how much more does he see value in us and care about us? I just love those verses. Okay, so I went back in with the black at the tail feather. And I'm going to add a little bit more aqua to my water just to get a richer color here. And I'm going to sop it up with my larger brush, because it's still just a bit too much water, I feel. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to go back in with we'll just dip right into the aqua. Since it's wet, since I've been using the brush to dig it out to pigment the water, I could go right in and get the depth that I want for the birds. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry, and then we'll go ahead and do the hats and the eyes, beak, and feet. Okay. So again with the small brush, and I'm just going to add a drop of water to the colors that I want to use. So I'm going to start with, red. And this time I'm not wetting the paper. I'm just going to use the water that's on my brush. So make sure that you blot your brush before you do it. Otherwise you're going to have a mess. And I think on this one, I'm going to leave that little ball white. So now then it'll look too Christmassy. So I'm going to color that ball there. And then we'll move on to the next one. I think I'm going to do, how about green? I'm going to mix just a little bit of water. This is Winsor Newton's Perylene Green. So it's a very rich, I use it a lot for my trees. It's a very rich green, and I think as long as I keep it watery, it'll be fine. So we'll do green here. Yeah, I like that. And this one I'll keep the little ball on the hat white. But I'll paint this, the folded up area. I'm going to paint that green as well. Too much water. Okay. And the bottom one I'm going to do, we'll do indigo. Again, it's Winsor Newton indigo. No, I want to do, yeah, we'll do indigo. I was thinking I'll do purple, but I'm going to go with my first instinct. And now with the black, I'm going to do the same thing. I am just going to go straight into the color, and this time I'm going to go in with a pretty dry brush. And this detail, you need to be very careful. Sometimes it's easier to use a brush with a better point, so you could even go back in and use your number 12 brush if you have these brushes, or something with a little bit finer point than what this one is. If you've got too much water on it, it's just gonna bleed everywhere. You'll have a puddle. So these finer areas, make sure that the brush that you're using is a good brush. This would also be a time that you could use like an acrylic brush or something that doesn't hold water, that has a nice point on it. I know there's a lot of multi-purpose brushes that you can use with acrylic or watercolor. Those would be fine here too. Just use what's available to you. Okay. And then we're going to do the branch here. So the brown that you've mixed, if you still have it on your tray, you can go ahead and fill in just the bottom. And do it using strokes. You can go right over the feet. And strokes, I mean paint lines, because then the water stops and it gives you a lot more texture than if you just do a clean line. You can see none of them are even, and there's shadows in it. And that's the look that we're going for. And then you can just drop areas of, I'm going to mix some black in with that blue that I had for the hat, and just drop just a few random areas. And let the water carry it. And let's go just a little bit more blue into it. Ooh, that's a lot of blue. Whoops. So we'll do a little more black. Again, just little drops. Just for the texture, the shadows, the variation. You can go back and forth between the brown, and we could even add just a little bit more orange here to warm up that brown. And obviously we want that to dry before we do the feet, the bird feet. So, and rinse your brush, and we'll do the bird feet, and we'll go back in and darken some of the aqua areas. Okay, now that's all dry. So I'm just gonna go in and add a little bit more rich color into some of the areas that I know would be darker. So like under Okay, I have way too much water on here, so I'm just going to pull some of it off. And I'm doing that just by sopping it up with the brush and blotting it on this towel. And now I'm going to go in and add more pigment to it. So now I've got a much richer, let me see if I've got a test paper here, a much richer aqua color. Now I could spread that out and it would be lighter, or I could leave it really heavy on the paper and it would be give me that darkness that I like. So under his belly, and this is the dry or the wet on dry technique, under his belly and under his wing is kind of where I want to focus. We'll just make a wing over here. I'm not sure if this one even has a wing. Okay, and now I'm going to rinse my brush, blot it once, and just use that water. And this is a pretty quick process because you can see that that's already started to dry and it left a line. So you have to work fast. If you're a slow painter, if you're a beginner, then just do one bird at a time. Just going to carry some of that water. Use the color that's on the paper. If you didn't get this rich of a color, then take some of it off your tray, some of the water off your tray, and add more pigment, just like I did. If you want to drop a little bit more in after that, it'll soften that line just a little bit more. Okay, also in the tail feathers. You get the tip and then pull a little bit of that aqua up the center. When you look at a bird's tail feathers, it's actually lighter on the outside because the feathers get thinner and the light shines through them. Now we'll just go back in with the brown around the edge. To get up here, I want that a little bit darker too. So some of that, oh, that's green. Some of that brownish black. I'm just going to mix some of the blue. Again, one of my favorite things about watercolor is just use what you have. I've already got blue on my tray. And then a couple areas on the branch too. I'm going to do just a little bit more there. Very thin, quick strokes right along the bottom. Really enhance that shadow. There we go. And then I'm going to soften that belly again. and add just a little bit more pink. And I'm going to create a wing right back here. I'm not sure if there's supposed to be a wing there, but I think it looks like it needs one. And now back to the hats. Right along the area that's folded up, and then under the ball, and paint the underside of the ball. So you can see where I have the shadows. And now with the dry brush, this detail work gets pretty hard sometimes. When I say dry brush, I don't mean a brush that's not been wet, but a brush that's been blotted a couple times on your towel. And that gives us the shadows to make that hat pop a little bit. And I'm going to take my towel and blot it right up. Okay, same with the green. Gonna mix a little bit more here. And I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow because I don't like quite how that dried. A little bit of yellow and a little bit of aqua. And same thing. Just go right in here. And since I left this ball white, I'm going to show you how to do that with some very watered down blue paint, how to make that shadow. And to the blue. Brush was just a little bit too dry, so it wasn't spreading the paint, so I stuck it back in the water. And this one I'm going to make some blue texture here. So just some vertical lines. And with this one right here, it's just watered down blue, so very small amount of blue. So my brush is pretty wet, and I'm just pulling the very edge of these puddles that I've made on my palette and just drop it right in the bottom. There, like so. And the same with the white area of this hat, very bottom. We could even do a little bit of texture and just pull some of that color up very, very light. You probably can't even see that. But you get the idea. I'm not sure that I really like how dark this is, so I'm pulling a little bit off. Smoothing it a little bit with a drier brush. And let's go in with another layer of brown on the wings. And the face. Now, the paint is on the tip of the brush, so if I push down, there's very little paint at the top of the brush, which is how I faded that. So if you start coloring it in, and then just push down on your entire brush, the entire length of my bristles is on this paper right now, and it fades it out. It's a little brush technique. And I'm going to add a little bit of the aqua to the tip of the wing too. I want it a little bit more watery. Now I think we're ready for snow, so I'm going to let this dry. And with a white eraser, I am erasing the top of the branch that I have drawn in. Oh, we still haven't done his feet. Yeah, we need to do their feet, don't we? So same concept. You can either stick with this brush or grab something a little bit pointier. This is just a generic. I'm not sure that that's any better. Okay, maybe something like this. Now these will hold no water at all. Oh, they must hold a little bit because they just woke the beast there. I'm just going to put a little bit more black onto my tray with it. And just draw 3 little feet. It's cold out, so they are going to be crouched down . So all you're going to see is their feet and not their legs. This one's belly's covering his other foot. I like to do 2 small and then in the middle do a little bit longer. And this one will do a little bit of a leg on this one because the branch is tilted. Hopefully those look okay. Okay, and now the fun part. This is Winsor Newton's white ink, and it's kind of my go-to for snow. What I like to do is dip a semi-wet brush. So I've got my number 12 brush soaked. Now I'm going to blot once on each side and stick it just in the top of the ink. And hold my finger out and tap down onto the paper. Now we all know that snow is white, but this is art, so we can do whatever we want. So I'm also going to add a little bit of red splatters to it. And some of the aqua splatters. Okay. Anything that you don't want, you can blot up. If you use your towel, down and up. Don't smear. Don't wipe. Just down and up. Now I'm sure if I leave this go just for a little while, I will find more details that I want to add into it. Like right here, I'm just going to add a little white spot on the bird's eye. And we could enhance the snow a little bit on the branch. And we could spend all day making changes here. But I'm going to call it quits. I don't like how that snow fell right at the top of his eye. And so I didn't like that. So I'm pulling that off just a little bit. Yeah, so we're going to just let that dry. And then if I want to go back in and add a little bit more details, maybe add a little bit more shading on the hat, I can do that. But the last thing to do at this point would be to sign. And I always like to sign so that my signature is not prominent. So I'm traditional. I like the bottom right corner. So I'm just going to mix a little bit more brown here. And I like to use my brush as well. I have a lot of people that I teach that use just a pen. The liquid pens, these drafting pens, is what I always hand them to do. And I use a 0.5 or a 0.7 is typically what they use. And some people put their initials and the date, and some people put their full name. It's really up to you. But I like to sign with my brushes so that I can use a color that doesn't stand out very much. And this is a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to water it down and blot it up. Like so. Again, it's not that I don't want people to know who I am, it's just that I want them to see the birds and not my name. Okay. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Follow me if you haven't followed me, and we will see you next time.